Tonight, I invite you to close your eyes and step into the shadowy legend of the Silk Road, a route dressed up in stories of spice and gold. But in truth, it's an ancient trial by fire that swallowed hopes whole. You've seen the paintings, moonlit caravans, mysterious traders laughing under silk banners, a world that looks more like a fairy tale than a battlefield. But behind every romantic image lies the truth. Merciless deserts, mountain passes where the air itself tries to kill you, strangers who might be friends or thieves, and a silence so deep it could bury you. So lower the lights, pull the blankets tight, and let your mind slip out into a world where comfort is just a memory, where every mile is a question, and the only certainty is that the Silk Road remembers everyone who fails. Ready? Let's begin. It's a moonless night, and somewhere, far from the comfort of your familiar world, the quiet pulse of the ancient Silk Road begins to stir. For most people, the very mention of this legendary trade route conjures up a tapestry of dazzling images. Caravans outlined against gold-washed dunes, lantern-lit markets brimming with silk and spices, travelers exchanging warm smiles beneath endless starlit skies. But you're not most people tonight. You're wide awake, your mind tracing the ragged edges of uncertainty, and you're about to discover how quickly those soft-focused stories unravel the moment you actually set foot on this path. History books and bedtime stories have always tried to paint this road as something almost magical, as if anyone brave enough to try could become a merchant prince or an explorer fated for glory. Nobody mentions the sand in your mouth, the blisters blooming on your feet, or the bone-deep ache that starts in your back and never quite leaves. No one writes songs about the silent dread that falls over a caravan when the horizon seems to swallow the sun and nothing separates you from the unknown except a threadbare blanket and the reluctant warmth of an animal who'd rather spit than sleep. Let the dreamers imagine a world where the Silk Road is all romance and cultural exchange. Let them keep their images of domes gleaming in the sunrise, of wise old traders spinning tales by firelight. Because what you're stepping into is a very different kind of adventure, one that cares nothing for your ambitions or dreams. The Silk Road doesn't know your name. It doesn't care why you came. And if you're hoping to leave your mark on history, you may find your only real legacy is a half-remembered story whispered by someone who never even learned what happened to you. It all starts so quietly. The city is just beginning to surrender to sleep. Lanterns flickering in distant windows, the wind teasing the dust into restless little spirals at your feet. Your hands are restless, fidgeting with the straps of your pack, the knot in your stomach tighter than you want to admit. Maybe you tell yourself this is courage, that there's something noble in chasing fortune through deserts and mountains with names you've only just learned to pronounce. But even now, before the first step, you sense something else, an old, nameless fear. The kind of fear that creeps in when you realize you're leaving behind not just the comforts of home, but all the invisible rules that kept your world predictable. People always talk about the Silk Road as if it was a single straight line, drawn with a confident hand across the spine of Asia. They say you could travel from one end to the other and watch empires pass beneath your feet. But as you stand in the darkness, feeling the chill of the unknown at your back, you start to see the truth. This isn't a road at all. It's a maze, a shifting, tangled network of trails and whispers, each turn promising either salvation or disaster. Every story you've heard is just a shadow cast by the fires of those who actually survived.
The air is thick with the scent of dust, sweat, and something sharper. Maybe it's anticipation, maybe it's dread. You hear the shuffle of tired camels somewhere out of sight, the muted clink of coins being counted, hushed voices arguing over the price of water or the value of a prayer whispered for protection. All around you, the machinery of the Silk Road grinds to life, not with the pageantry of a festival, but with the weary determination of people who know that every journey here is a gamble. You remember the stories told by those who returned, how their eyes would drift away, how their laughter always sounded just a little forced. No one ever says what really happened out there, between one city and the next, between one dawn and the next cold midnight. Instead, they talk about the beauty of the markets, the taste of strange new fruit, the color of silk against the morning sky. No one tells you about the sandstorms that could peel the skin from your face, the nights spent listening to the wind howl like something alive, or the simple terror of waking in the dark and realizing you don't know which way is east. Tonight, the Silk Road is calling you, not with promises, but with a challenge, a dare to cross the threshold and see how long you can hold on to your hope before the road takes it apart, piece by piece. You try to steady your breathing, feeling the pulse in your throat, the weight of everything you couldn't bring, the ghosts of choices you can never quite leave behind. There's no glory here, not really, only the relentless forward motion of people who have nowhere else to go. Your fellow travelers are silent, faces half lit by the pale glow of the last candle. You see fear there too, the kind that hides behind jokes and forced bravado. Some of them dream of riches, imagining their names will echo in the great halls of distant cities. Others are running from secrets, debts, or the heavy hand of fate. But out here, under this endless sky, all those reasons begin to blur. Soon it won't matter why you started this journey. The only thing that will matter is whether you can finish it. You step away from the safety of the city walls, heart pounding, breath shallow, the darkness pressing in on all sides. The first sound you hear is not the music of a caravan, but the impatient snort of a camel and the soft crunch of your own footsteps on ancient, unforgiving earth. There's no audience, no one to witness this quiet act of courage or desperation. Just the memory of stories, the distant glimmer of stars, and the silent, invisible presence of the thousands who came before you, some returning, most not. The Silk Road is waiting, not to welcome you, but to test you, to strip away every illusion you've ever had about what it means to be brave, lucky, or clever. It will challenge you in ways you never expected, through places you never imagined, with dangers that have no name and no mercy. And as you move into the darkness, every sense alert, every instinct whispering caution, you realize that the only thing more frightening than the road ahead is the knowledge that turning back is no longer an option. You walk forward, feeling the weight of history at your heels and the emptiness of the desert in your chest. The city fades behind you, its lights shrinking until they're nothing but memory. Ahead lies the unknown, a road built not for the living, but for those willing to risk everything for a chance to cross it. And so you go, quietly, without fanfare, your story joining the silent chorus of countless others. The Silk Road cares nothing for your dreams, but it will remember your footsteps, if only for a moment, before the wind and sand sweep them away. Somewhere, far ahead, a new day waits. But for now, all that exists is the endless night, the uncertain path beneath your feet, and the realization that the only way out is through.
Not every journey begins with a clear decision. More often, it's a restless urge that builds quietly, a whisper at the edge of sleep, a longing you can't quite explain. For some, the Silk Road starts as an escape, a desperate bid to outrun the shadow of a debt collector, a stain on your reputation, or a punishment that waits just outside your door. For others, it's hunger, the cold arithmetic of empty cupboards and unpaid rent, the relentless hope that somewhere beyond the horizon, fortune waits in the form of spices, silk, or precious stones. Yet whatever reason first pushes you out the city gates, it begins to fade as soon as you cross the invisible line where comfort ends and possibility begins. The idea is always grand at the start. The thought of adventure is intoxicating. Imagine coming home with pouches of silver, a story for every scar, the envy of neighbors who never dared step beyond the safety of their own streets. You picture yourself bartering in sun-soaked bazaars, sipping unfamiliar wines, your name whispered with a mixture of respect and disbelief. There is always a dream, and it always glows brightest before the reality of the road sets in. But dreams, like coin, have a habit of running out. The first true moment of doubt comes in the silence after the city disappears, when the last familiar landmark has slipped behind you and there's nothing but open ground ahead. It's in that quiet, punctuated only by the uneven rhythm of your steps and the animal's irritated breath, that your mind starts to wander. You remember the stories not of glory, but of those who left and didn't return, those who vanished without a trace, their ambitions devoured by the long miles and the unseen dangers. You tell yourself you are different, you are prepared. You have packed carefully, chosen your companions with a shrewd eye, mapped out each stop, each possible danger. But self-assurance is a thin shield against the reality that waits for you in the wild. Out here, the road is honest. It has no time for the bravado of city dwellers or the fantasies of poets. The Silk Road will not flatter you or indulge your pride. It will show you exactly what you're made of and what you're afraid of. And what is it that drives people to take this risk, to stake their lives on a trade route older than memory? Sometimes it's greed, pure and simple. The knowledge that silks from the East fetch small fortunes in the markets of the West, that a few bolts of rare fabric could mean a lifetime of comfort. Sometimes it's pride, the wish to prove yourself worthy, to carve out a name that won't be washed away by the next rain. More often, it's necessity, the need to run from a past that clings like mud, to find a future somewhere you're not already known, or simply to put distance between yourself and a world that no longer welcomes you. There are those who run towards something, promise, redemption, a chance to rewrite their story. But just as many run away from the echo of a broken oath, the memory of a failed harvest, the embarrassment of a love that ended badly, or a sentence they'd rather not serve. Out here, under the endless, uncaring sky, all those reasons lose their shape and importance. The road doesn't care about your why. It only cares how you will answer its next demand. The company you keep reveals as much about you as your destination. Among your fellow travelers, you sense the same uneasy blend of hope and fear. Some keep their heads high, already rehearsing stories for the day they return. Others avoid your gaze, their silence heavy with secrets. You see hands that tremble as they count coins, eyes that flicker toward the darkness with every strange sound. Nobody speaks of what they're running from or what they're hoping to find. The unspoken understanding is that everyone here is hiding something, maybe even from themselves. Soon, the first challenge of the road makes itself known. Maybe it's a broken wheel, a lost water skin, a guide who mumbles about changing routes when the old one grows dangerous. The realities of travel begin to scrape away your expectations. Nights are colder than you remembered, mornings harsher, every task heavier than it should be. There's no time for regret, only for endurance.
You catch yourself envying the animals, their simple motives, their blunt honesty. All they want is food and rest, and they're not afraid to show it. The hunger for wealth, the drive for recognition, the desperation to escape, these are all powerful fuel, but they burn quickly out here. As the days stretch on, the reasons you once clung to become less important than the need to put one foot in front of the other, to stay warm, to stay moving. You learn that ambition means little when your lips crack from thirst, or when the wind carries with it 1,000 miles of dust and rumor. You start to understand the subtle art of lowering your expectations. Sometimes survival itself is reward enough. Even so, the mind is a stubborn thing. At night, when the fire's embers have faded and the noises of the camp fade to a restless hush, you find yourself circling back to your original question: why? Why would anyone choose this path? In that darkness, with the road stretching out in both directions, toward whatever you left behind and whatever still waits, you realize the answer isn't simple. It's not a matter of gold or fear or glory. It's a knot of all these things, tangled together with hope, regret, and the stubborn refusal to let life simply happen to you. On the Silk Road, every step forward is a gamble. Each sunrise is both a victory and a threat, a reminder that no matter your motives, the road will take what it wants. And yet, even knowing that, you keep moving. Because behind every reason to turn back, there's still that one small hope that at the end of it all, something will have changed, that you will have changed. So you walk on, letting your fears and ambitions settle into the rhythm of the journey. Ahead, the world is wide and wild and merciless, but you are still moving, still choosing, still chasing something just beyond the next bend. Whatever brought you here, it is no longer your anchor. It is the wind at your back, pushing you further than you ever meant to go. And as the night gives way to the first hint of dawn, you realize the only real answer to the question of why is simply because you had to. Because, despite every warning, you couldn't bring yourself to stay behind. By the time the first day gives way to the long, silent hours of travel, the sheer size of the world begins to press in from all sides. The city that once seemed so sprawling now feels like a distant memory, its walls and familiar noises swallowed by the vastness of open country. Every step forward is a step away from everything you knew, and with each passing hour, the fabric of your old life unravels a little more, leaving you more exposed to the unfamiliar than you realized possible.
The year is 1260, though out here on the edge of the known world, the number feels like a rumor. One more thread in the tangle of stories and dates traded by passing strangers. You've heard the elders whisper that this is an age of unprecedented change, a time when the rules have been rewritten by riders whose banners carry the winds of conquest from sunrise to sunset. It's the era of the Pax Mongolica, the so-called Mongol peace, a phrase tossed around in marketplaces with a kind of nervous hope. To the uninitiated, it sounds like reassurance, a promise of safety and order. But the further you walk, the more you notice the cracks beneath the words. On the surface, yes, the road is busier than it's been in generations. There are more traders, more wagons, and, for now, fewer bands of roving marauders lurking just beyond the reach of firelight. The Mongol Empire stretches like an iron thread across the continent, binding distant cities with its couriers and edicts. It's said that a merchant can now cross from the farthest reaches of China to the heart of Persia without fearing the sudden violence that once haunted every crossroads. But as you step into the swirling currents of this new world, you realize that peace, out here, is never what it seems. You're surrounded by strangers, some familiar in their hunger, some alien in every gesture and word. Each one moves with a certain watchfulness, eyes scanning the horizon, hands never far from the hilt of a knife or the reassuring weight of a purse. The first lesson is simple. Trust is a currency in short supply. The air is thick with unfamiliar languages, some sharp and quick, others lilting and slow, a cacophony of accents that turns even basic questions into small adventures. You try to follow, to learn, to catch the meaning beneath the words, but you mostly end up lost in the undertow of competing dialects and half-meant promises. It doesn't take long for the novelty to wear thin. The endless horizon is both thrilling and terrifying. So much space, so little certainty. The land itself is a mosaic of extremes. Dust and thorn scrub yield to pockets of unexpected green, then fade again into expanses of rock and sand that shimmer with heat by day and vanish into shadow by night. The sky stretches forever, cloudless and merciless, and with every new mile, the weight of the journey presses harder on your shoulders. At first, you catch yourself searching for order, for signs that someone, somewhere, is in control. The Mongol banners you glimpse at the gates, the stamps on travel permits, the armored messengers racing past with the authority of distant khans. These are the threads that hold the illusion together. But chaos is never far away. News travels fast, a border closed by a sudden quarrel between local governors, a caravan attacked on a side road, a city gate sealed against rumors of plague. The empire is wide, but its grasp is not always steady, and you learn quickly how easily peace can dissolve into a scramble for survival. With each new encounter, the sense of being out of place grows sharper. Your accent marks you as an outsider. Your clothes, chosen so carefully back home, now seem all wrong. Too fine for rough work, too plain for the more opulent cities, always a little bit suspicious. You try to blend in, to mimic the movements of those who have walked this way before. But there is no hiding the hesitance in your step, the uncertainty in your eyes. The road is a stage, and everyone you meet knows their part, everyone but you. Small setbacks accumulate. A guide you paid in advance disappears before dawn, taking with him not only his fee, but a crucial scrap of information about the safest river crossing. A camel balks at a bridge, and in the chaos, you nearly lose half your trade goods to the rushing current below. Even the weather seems determined to humble you. Sudden dust storms that leave you choking and blinded. Nights so cold your teeth ache as you try to sleep. Every moment on the road is a negotiation, with the land, with your companions, with the shifting rules of a world that obeys only itself. And yet, even in the thick of confusion and fatigue, there are flashes of awe. You see cities rising on the horizon, their minarets and domes catching the light like beacons. You watch as merchants from every corner of the empire gather in the dusk, their voices mingling in a symphony of trade and gossip. You realize for the first time how vast and interconnected this world truly is. A living tapestry, dense with the hopes and ambitions of people not so different from yourself. Still, it is a humbling place for a newcomer. The Silk Road doesn't care how clever you thought you were, or how many times you rehearsed your plans back home. It is an endless audition, and most who try to play the lead find themselves quickly relegated to the background, if they're lucky. There are moments when the road seems to fold in on itself, when every path looks the same, every face a mask. It's in these moments that the old stories about the Silk Road lose their shine, replaced by a more honest truth. This journey is not about adventure or even profit. It's about learning to move through chaos without losing yourself entirely. You fall asleep that first night with the ground hard beneath your back and the sky so wide above you it almost hurts to look at. The sounds of distant animals,
the snap of a fire, the uneasy shuffling of your own caravan all blend together into a restless lullaby. Somewhere far ahead, the promise of a better life waits. But for now, you are only a small figure on an endless road, wrapped in a blanket of confusion, hope, and the uneasy knowledge that whatever peace the Mongols have promised, the world out here still belongs to the bold, the wary, and the lucky. No one ever warns you how quickly the Silk Road erases your sense of direction, how the image of a clear, straight path evaporates the moment you take your first real turn into the unknown. The maps, if you're lucky enough to have one, are little more than stories drawn on scraps of parchment, full of confident arrows and optimistic town names. You trace them with your finger at night, trying to convince yourself that there's logic in the chaos, that a road of legend must surely have one true route from beginning to end. But the longer you travel, the clearer it becomes. This isn't a road at all. It's a labyrinth, a living, shifting maze that swallows the careless, the arrogant, and the hopeful alike. Your first days are spent following what looks like the main track, the one packed firm by hundreds of caravan feet and the occasional rut carved by a merchant's heavy wagon. The dust is thick, the sun fierce, the only landmarks the distant shimmer of heat and the occasional ragged shrub clinging to life at the roadside. But soon the trail splits. One branch veers off toward a cluster of distant hills, another angles into the brush, a third disappears into the teeth of the desert itself. No markers, no helpful signs, only the memory of a rumor that the leftmost path is quicker, unless it rains, and the uncomfortable knowledge that no one ever seems entirely sure. You fall in with a group who claim to know the way, veterans with the calm, distant eyes of people who have seen too many sunrises between cities. They argue quietly about which track to take, the debate laced with old grudges and new suspicions. Someone insists on the northern route, swearing it hugs the edge of a river and brings you to water before sundown. Another claims the southern passage is safer, that the risk of bandits is lessened if you stay close to the low hills, but the sand is deeper and the camels suffer. The voices never fully agree. Every choice is a gamble, and you realize as you adjust your burden and squint into the glare that even the most experienced among you are only one mistake away from disaster.
What you don't notice, what no one tells you in the city, is how quickly the landscape conspires to mislead you. The tracks split and merge, vanish beneath shifting drifts of sand, or scatter among the rocks like so many broken promises. There are places where the path all but disappears, leaving you with nothing but the faded bones of some unlucky predecessor as a silent warning. Even the sun can deceive. It's easy to convince yourself that east is a little further left, that a distant glimmer on the horizon must be the right direction, until you realize you've spent hours circling a dried-up well or skirting the edge of an old salt flat that swallowed dozens before you. The cost of error is never small. Sometimes it's only time, a day spent retracing your steps, tempers flaring as water grows scarce and animals protest. More often, it's supplies, a lost jug of water, a satchel of food left behind in the panic of a sudden detour. In the worst moments, it's someone falling ill under the relentless sun, or a member of the group slipping behind, their footsteps erased by wind and memory. The labyrinth of the Silk Road is ruthless. It punishes those who hesitate, those who rush, and especially those who dare to believe the way forward is ever truly clear. You begin to understand the old traveler's superstitions, the bits of colored cloth tied to scrubby branches, the crude cairns piled at forked paths, the whispered prayers spoken before choosing which shadow to follow at dawn. You find yourself scanning the ground for faint traces, a recent hoofprint, the ashes of a campfire long since abandoned, the glint of a broken pot half buried in the dirt. Every clue is precious, every scrap of evidence a lifeline. Still, the terrain changes faster than your memory can keep up. Hills rise and fall, rivers appear where none should be,
Entire forests of stunted trees stand as silent mazes within the greater maze, each one promising shelter and instead offering confusion. When the sun begins to drop and the shadows lengthen, the stakes grow higher. In daylight, every misstep is a nuisance. At night, when the cold bites through your clothes and the silence seems endless, every wrong turn is an echo of old dangers. Stories drift through the camp, of merchants who vanished for days only to emerge, empty-eyed and broken, weeks later in the wrong city, their fortunes gone, their maps rendered meaningless by a single bad choice at the wrong fork in the road. And then there is the human element. Not every guide is honest, and not every caravan shares your goals. There are men and women who lead others astray on purpose, whether for profit or revenge, or out of sheer bitterness at the road itself. Some pretend to know a shortcut, promising a quicker path through a hidden valley or a clever detour around a dried-up river. You listen, weighing every word, but the truth is always out of reach. Sometimes the shortcut is real, sometimes it's a trap, and sometimes it's just another way to get lost, another story to be told in the next city if you ever reach it. At times, the labyrinth feels endless. The sense of direction you once took for granted is slowly stripped away by fatigue, hunger, and the constant uncertainty of the landscape. You begin to move by habit, following whoever seems most confident, trusting your luck more than your judgment. You learn that hope itself is a kind of currency, traded quietly in the dark between travelers who have run out of other resources. There are moments when you believe you finally found the right way, when the ground grows firmer, the air smells faintly of water, or the stars align in a pattern you half remember from childhood. But the Silk Road is patient. It waits for you to let down your guard, to believe for a moment that you're safe, and then it sends a storm, a flood, or a rumor of bandits to scatter you once again. You realize, slowly and with growing dread, that the only certainty is movement. Stopping is never an option. If you stand still, the labyrinth will claim you. If you turn back, the way home is just another set of tangled trails, each one more uncertain than the last. All you can do is press forward, eyes wide, heart pounding, hoping that the next fork in the road brings you closer to the place you imagined when this journey first began. And so you walk on, step by uncertain step, the maze unfolding around you with every mile. The promise of the Silk Road was always a lie, a single shining path connecting worlds. What you found is 1,000 twisting choices, each one more treacherous than the last. There are no second chances here, only the lessons written in the dust behind you and the silent, watchful eyes of those who once believed the road was theirs to master. The only map that matters is the one you draw with your own feet, day after day, never knowing if the next turn will bring you fortune or leave you wandering forever in the labyrinth's endless embrace. You learn very quickly that on the Silk Road, no one travels alone, not unless they have a secret wish to vanish without a trace. So you find yourself drawn into a caravan, that awkward assembly of strangers, animals, and ambition stitched together by nothing more substantial than the hope of safety in numbers. There is no ceremony in joining. One day you are walking with your thoughts for company. The next, you are swallowed into a lumbering procession of voices, dust, and the constant stubborn complaints of camels. The caravan looks like unity from a distance, a line of people and animals, all moving with a single purpose. But the closer you get, the more you see the cracks, the little fractures running along every relationship. Your new companions are a mixture of merchants and wanderers, hired guards, interpreters, cooks, and spiritual guides, each one carrying their own secret reasons for risking the road. Some look at you with curiosity, others with suspicion. Introductions are brief and careful. Names are exchanged, but never quite trusted. Everyone listens for accents, watches for signs that you might be friend or threat, rival or easy mark. The first lesson is that the group's harmony is fragile. Everyone's survival depends on cooperation, but trust is rare and slow to grow. It begins with the animals. Your camels glare at one another, jostling for the best spot in line, spitting and moaning when forced to carry too much or walk too close. The drivers argue in clipped whispers, debating who knows the fastest way through the next stretch of desert, which merchant's goods should be loaded last, whose animals deserve the last mouthful of water at the evening stop. The smallest perceived insult, a poorly timed joke, a glance that lingers too long, a boot placed on the wrong blanket, can spiral into an argument that echoes through the night. Conflicts simmer beneath the surface, fueled by exhaustion, heat, and the constant anxiety of travel. Cultural differences become both a shield and a weapon. The caravan might include a Persian silk trader who refuses to eat beside the rough-mannered Turkic drovers, a quiet Buddhist monk who frowns at the rowdy songs of Mongol guards, a Sogdian scribe who speaks 3 languages but trusts no one enough to translate honestly. Every day brings new misunderstandings. Someone's greeting, innocent in their own tongue, sounds like an insult in another. A gesture of gratitude is mistaken for a curse. The cook serves a stew flavored with unfamiliar spices, and a minor revolt erupts around the fire as stomachs churn and accusations fly. You learn to be careful with your words, to weigh each gesture. A laugh too loud draws scowls. A silence too long is treated as a sign of plotting. There is little room for privacy, and even less for secrets. Every night, as the camp settles and the fires burn low, you hear voices drifting from tent to tent, swapping rumors and complaints. Some worry about bandits or ghosts in the next valley. Others watch their own companions, counting packs and coin purses with growing suspicion.
Suspicion becomes routine. At first, you tell yourself that everyone is only being careful, that caution is a virtue out here. But the feeling grows. Every missing item, every strange glance, every whispered conversation becomes another reason to guard your words, your food, your place in line. You catch the guards eyeing each other, as if deciding whose loyalty is the cheapest, whose patience the shortest. Even shared meals are laced with tension. Bowls are passed with forced politeness, and stories are told with careful omissions. The only unity comes in small, fleeting moments, when a sandstorm drives everyone to huddle together under battered canvas, when a wandering musician plucks a melody familiar enough to bring smiles, when someone shares dried fruit from a home far away, and for a few minutes everyone remembers what it felt like to trust. But as soon as the threat passes or the song ends, the boundaries reappear. Each traveler retreats to their corner of the camp, clutching their own worries, their own dreams. You start to notice the little alliances and rivalries forming within the caravan. Groups cluster around their leaders, drawn by old loyalties or shared languages. The guards keep mostly to themselves, joking in a dialect thick with threats and laughter. The cooks and drovers are the invisible glue, grumbling but essential, never quite trusted but always needed. Even as the caravan moves together, every step forward feels a little more precarious. You feel the pressure of watching and being watched, the knowledge that anyone here could be your salvation or your downfall. The road encourages this wariness, Stories abound of caravans splintered by quarrels, of partners turned rivals, of a single wrong word costing someone their place in the group, or worse. Every sunset brings a new calculation: who to trust, who to avoid, who might decide that tonight is the night to settle the score. Yet, for all its tension, the caravan is your only shield against the greater dangers of the Silk Road. The wilds are merciless to the solitary, and even the most fractious group is stronger than a lone traveler. So you play your part, sharing a joke when needed, offering help when it's safest, keeping your own secrets as close as everyone else keeps theirs. With each passing day, the road itself weaves the group together with invisible threads of necessity, binding you to these strangers, these rivals, these temporary allies. You move forward as one, because the only thing more dangerous than trusting the wrong person is walking this road alone.
Before you've even left sight of the city's walls, your entire future is already balanced on the backs of a few stubborn animals and the contents of your worn leather packs. It's a heavy, peculiar burden, the weight of hope measured not just in silk and spice, but in every decision you made when the world still felt safe and predictable. In the beginning, you imagine the right cargo will guarantee success: fine fabrics that shimmer in the morning light, glass beads that catch every color of the sky, fragrant bundles of cinnamon and saffron carefully wrapped to survive the endless jostling. These are the treasures you picture in foreign bazaars, each one the seed of some new fortune. But even as you pack, 1,000 tiny doubts slip in with the dust. The first lesson is simple and cruel. Everything you bring must serve more than one purpose. That soft bolt of brocade you plan to sell in a distant market, it will double as a sunshade by day and, if things go poorly, a burial shroud by night. Every object becomes a calculation. Can it be traded? Can it be hidden? Can it be burned for warmth if the nights grow too long and cold? The space on each animal is precious. Too much weight, and the camels kneel in protest, groaning and refusing to rise. Too little, and you'll be accused of not carrying your share, or worse, of hiding wealth for yourself. There is always a temptation to take risks, to gamble on goods that might bring unthinkable profits. A handful of uncut gems, their value masked beneath layers of dust and old cloth, could buy you a new life, if you can keep them hidden, if they're not snatched by thieves, if some official doesn't demand them as taxes before you ever reach your destination. You think about paper, light as air but precious in the right hands, porcelain, beautiful but brittle, tea and lapis, always in demand, always a target. Yet every prize is a liability. A box of spices might leak its scent into the night, drawing unwanted attention. A jar of honey could crack in a fall, soaking through everything, sticky and ruined by midday. The group debates endlessly over what's worth the risk. Some argue for bulk, wool, copper, sturdy pots that won't shatter no matter how rough the ride. Others chase rarity, believing a single bolt of the finest silk is worth more than a wagon full of everyday wares. And always the threat of loss hangs overhead like a cloud. One slip of a hand, one poorly tied knot, and a week's profit vanishes beneath a sand dune or sinks without a trace in a sudden river crossing. The old hands count and recount their cargo at every stop, checking for cracks, for missing straps, for evidence that someone in the caravan has grown desperate enough to steal. The farther you travel, the more you realize that survival depends as much on improvisation as on planning. Nothing stays as you intended. Water skins spring leaks halfway between oases, the precious liquid seeping away into the ground before anyone notices. Food stores, dried meat, hard bread, wrinkled raisins are chewed thin by rodents, or left to ferment in the heat until even hunger won't make them appealing. You start to barter with other travelers for things you never imagined needing: an extra needle for mending a torn saddlebag,
a twist of rope to replace one lost to a panicked animal in the night. Every item becomes valuable, every scrap of cloth or length of twine a potential lifeline. You learn to travel light, to let go of the idea that wealth is measured only in what you can sell. A sturdy cloak, a handful of salt, a few small coins for bribes, these become more precious than any jewel. Some nights, as you try to sleep with your pack serving as both pillow and safe, you hear other merchants murmuring prayers over their goods, whispering the names of the cities where they hope to sell, bargaining with the silence that their cargo will last just a little longer, stay just a little safer. It's not greed that binds you to these possessions now, but the quiet, desperate hope that something, anything, you brought will be enough to see you through. Sometimes, necessity forces you to improvise in ways that would be laughable back home. The last of your dried apricots melt in the midday sun, fermenting into a sticky wine that you drink out of boredom or stubborn optimism. A silk scarf, once intended for trade, is used to bind a blistered ankle, saving you from falling behind. When a storm tears through the camp and ruins half the tents, old carpets are patched together for shelter, and every hand, no matter how wealthy or proud, is pressed into service. There are always losses. A camel goes lame and must be left behind, its packs divided among those strong enough or desperate enough to take on more weight. A sudden gust topples a pile of ceramic bowls, their sharp edges glinting in the sand until the sun buries them for good. Each misfortune is a reminder that the Silk Road is not just a test of commerce, but of adaptation. To survive, you must learn to see every object, every burden, as both hope and hazard. What began as a parade of riches is slowly whittled down by the realities of distance and hardship. By the time you cross your first true stretch of desert, the precious spices have blended their scents in a single confusing aroma. The cloth has grown stiff with sweat and dust. The coins in your pouch are lighter, rattling with a little more urgency at each checkpoint. And yet, for all the losses, you keep going. Because hope, too, is cargo. Intangible, impossible to pack, but heavier than anything your camels will ever carry. It pushes you forward, step by uncertain step, across a landscape that's always threatening to take more than it gives, daring you to believe that at the end of the journey, something of value will remain. From the very beginning, you realize the real backbone of your journey is not the traders or even the guards, but the camels. Those grumbling, stubborn creatures who carry not just your cargo, but your fate across the wildest stretches of earth. They're not the gentle, noble beasts you once imagined, nor the exotic icons from distant fables. Up close, they are all sharp elbows, unpredictable moods, and a smell that seeps into your clothes, your hair, your dreams. Each morning starts with a negotiation between you and a camel who has no interest in negotiation. They glare at you with contempt, their eyes heavy with centuries of silent grievances. When you try to load their packs, they protest loudly, with a guttural groan that vibrates right down to your bones. They snap their jaws, stomp their feet, and sometimes refuse to rise, holding the entire caravan hostage to their mood. Some travelers swear by gentle words or a soothing song. Others try threats or bribes, waving a carrot or a handful of thorny weeds as a peace offering. The camels are unmoved by any of it. You begin to suspect that for every mile you gain, you owe some secret tax to their patience. At first, you treat these battles as minor inconveniences, moments to laugh about at the campfire. But the novelty fades fast. The camels set the rhythm of each day. When they're in a good mood, you can travel for hours, the caravan stretching out across the landscape like an arrow drawn to its target. But when they dig in their heels, nothing can move them. Not force, not pleading, not even the promise of water at the next stop. The oldest drivers, faces carved by wind and sun, explain that the only thing you can count on is the animal's ability to outlast your frustration. Even as you curse their stubbornness, you grow dependent on their strength. The camels bear crushing loads, hauling bundles of silk, sacks of grain, water skins, and bundles of hope through landscapes that would break a lesser animal. They move with a peculiar, swaying grace over dunes and stones, their feet spreading the weight so evenly that even the deepest sand is no true barrier. They can go days with barely a drink, surviving on thorny weeds and bitter roots that would leave a mule desperate and a horse on the brink. In the burning heat, when the sun turns the world to a shimmering mirage, the camels endure. When the night chills your bones and turns sweat to frost, the camels endure. You learn to measure your own endurance by theirs, as if by simply following their lead you might make it through one more day. But living with camels isn't just a question of logistics. It's a test of willpower, of emotional stamina you didn't know you'd need. They are loud, opinionated companions. They spit, sometimes in irritation, sometimes in boredom, sometimes, you're convinced, out of a sense of humor. Their complaints echo through the camp, a chorus of moans and growls that fill every pause in conversation. At night, you lie awake, listening to their restless shifting and the occasional scream that sends shivers down your spine. It's easy to believe the stories that they're secretly plotting your humiliation. The care of animals is another burden layered onto every day. Water must be rationed, carefully poured, so that each beast gets enough to last but not enough to waste. Saddles and harnesses rub sores into their skin, which must be tended, even if it means slowing the whole group. Lost animals are a disaster, not just for the loss of their strength, but for the imbalance they create in the caravan. With one camel gone, others must be loaded heavier, and every step grows harder. Arguments break out over whose animal is weakest, whose turn it is to walk instead of ride, whose impatience has cost the group another precious hour. In the press of days, you discover a strange kinship between people and camels, a mutual resentment, a shared stubbornness. Both want the journey to end, both tolerate the other only as much as necessary. You start to understand that the rhythm of the road is less about your plans and more about the moods of the animals, the heat of the day, and the endless repetition of small frustrations. Everyone's patience wears thin. Jokes become sharper, laughter more brittle. You catch yourself glaring at a camel as if it understands your curses, and you almost believe it does.
Psychological exhaustion seeps in slowly, disguised at first as simple fatigue. The days become a loop. Pack, walk, rest, repeat. You find yourself watching the camels, envying their ability to ignore the bigger picture, to simply exist from one mouthful of weeds to the next. Human anxieties feel foolish in comparison, yet they grow heavier as the miles pass. You wake up sore and stiff, the taste of dust and regret thick on your tongue. You dread the morning struggle, the battle with an animal who might, with a single act of stubbornness, delay the entire caravan. Yet, despite everything, you can't help but respect their endurance. The camels are never eager, but they are never truly broken. They simply keep going, mile after mile, indifferent to your dreams and your failures. In their stubborn survival, you find a strange comfort. If they can last another day in this harsh world, perhaps so can you. Each evening, as you settle beside the animals and listen to their huffs and snorts, you begin to see your own journey reflected in their obstinance. A contest of will, not just with the road, but with yourself. And if the camels are never truly tamed, neither perhaps are you. The battle of character continues, one step at a time, into the unknown. Each day on the Silk Road begins before the sun even dares touch the horizon, in that cold, breathless dark when every muscle aches and your mind struggles to convince itself that standing up is worth it.
The night is never long enough, not really. You rise with the others, groping for boots that never quite dry, rolling up a blanket stiff with dust, fumbling for a crust of bread or a mouthful of last night's flat tea. The world is silent, but for the snorts of animals, the muted grumbling of travelers, the soft clatter of pots and harness buckles. Here, every morning feels like the start of an expedition, and every expedition feels like it could be your last. The path itself never stays the same for long. What seemed clear yesterday now twists in unexpected ways, or vanishes altogether under a carpet of fresh wind-blown sand. Sometimes you march along a track wide enough for 10 men to walk abreast, packed solid by centuries of feet and hooves. Sometimes you follow a faint trail through rocks and thorns, praying the stones you pass are markers and not just the aimless graffiti of nature. Even the sun can be deceptive, its pale arc through the sky confused by haze, while the distant mountains on the horizon seem to shift, never quite matching the sketches in your memory.
You grow used to not knowing exactly where you are. Your hopes for swift progress give way to a grim kind of patience. Each day's march becomes a test. Have you rationed your water well? Can you coax a little more effort from your feet? Will the camel in front of you decide to cooperate or simply sit down and refuse to budge? Navigation is less a science and more an act of collective faith. The guides consult battered maps, count the stars, argue over which dried riverbed to follow, squint at the sky for omens. You listen, knowing that even the best of them is as much a gambler as a scholar. At any moment, a single wrong turn could lead to a day lost, a night without shelter, or worse, a story added to the growing ledger of vanished travelers. The rhythm of the road is a rhythm of survival, set not by your plans, but by the needs of the group and the whims of the land. Walk, rest, drink, walk again. At noon the heat presses down like a hand, and even the most stubborn boastful merchant falls silent, head bowed beneath a ragged cloth. You watch your own feet, counting steps to pass the hours. Sometimes you try to distract yourself, hum a song from home, recite the names of cities you hope to see, count the beats of the camel's swaying gait as if it were a clock. But routine is a fragile thing, forever under threat. A broken sandal strap, a twisted ankle, a water skin found leaking. The smallest problem can disrupt the whole caravan. If someone falls ill, the group slows or even stops. A nervous circle gathering around the sufferer, voices low, eyes anxious. The delay is measured in stolen hours, in whispers about lost profit and growing danger. Rest is rare, and true rest almost unheard of. At night, the air chills fast, turning sweat to shivers. You huddle close to your bundle of possessions, listening to the shifting, uneasy sounds of others trying not to think about tomorrow. Yet even in the monotony, hope endures, fragile, persistent, as necessary as water. Some days the horizon surprises you with the green of a distant grove, or the promise of a real meal. A night under a solid roof draws jokes and laughter from tired lips. People share stories, not to pass the time, but to convince themselves and each other that the struggle is worth it, that somewhere ahead waits reward or relief. You become a different person out here. The fine distinctions of rank and pride fade with each new hardship. The most expensive tunic looks like every other when caked in dust. You begin to admire small acts of generosity, a shared strip of cloth, a joke told at just the right moment, a guide who quietly gives up his own water so a stranger might keep walking. But suspicion always lingers at the edge of camp, never quite fading. You keep your pouch close and your trust closer, learning that hope is as much a matter of vigilance as faith.
The road teaches you not to expect comfort, only the small victories. A cool breeze after days of burning heat, the distant call of a bird signaling water, the feel of a familiar hand on your shoulder when you're certain you can't walk another step. The way ahead is always uncertain, the rules always shifting, and yet you continue, one tired foot after another, half guided by instinct, half driven by the stubborn refusal to be counted among the lost. There are days when you think you can't continue, when the only thing keeping you upright is the knowledge that everyone else is suffering too, that quitting is not only unwise, it's unthinkable. The world out here is too big, too empty for second chances. There is no going back, no easy retreat. Every night, as you look up at a sky crowded with unfamiliar stars, you tell yourself that you are still moving, still surviving, still hoping. And that, on the Silk Road, is a kind of victory no map can promise. There is a moment when the land changes, when the last green patch fades behind you and the world ahead unrolls as nothing but shifting, endless sand. Even the wind sounds different here, sighing low and steady, picking up dust and memories, until the sun is nothing more than a burning coin pressed flat against the sky. The desert is not the absence of life, but the stripping away of everything unnecessary. Its silence is absolute, broken only by the crunch of feet on dry gravel, the uneasy snorts of camels, and the occasional cry of a bird circling high above, searching for something left behind. The first night in the desert, you discover what it means to have no walls, no roof, no safety beyond what you can carry on your back. As dusk falls, the heat does not gently fade, it flees, stolen by a darkness that arrives with a sudden chill. The sand that scorched your skin by day now leaches warmth from your bones. Fires are small, sometimes nothing more than the flicker of oil in a clay lamp. You huddle close with the others, drawing your cloak tighter, listening to the nervous laughter that covers uncertainty. Above, the sky is dizzying. There are more stars than you have ever seen, strewn in impossible numbers across a sky so deep and wide you feel as though you might fall upward forever. Their cold light is beautiful, but offers no comfort. Shadows stretch in every direction, blurring the line between what is real and what might be. The desert is full of stories, about travelers who vanished in the dark, about voices on the wind, about lights that dance just out of reach. These tales swirl around the camp, growing bolder as the night deepens. Even the bravest among you glance over their shoulders, checking for shapes in the dark, for eyes glinting at the edge of firelight. Above, the sky is dizzying. There are more stars than you have ever seen, strewn in impossible numbers across a sky so deep and wide you feel as though you might fall upward forever. Their cold light is beautiful, but offers no comfort. Shadows stretch in every direction, blurring the line between what is real and what might be. The desert is full of stories, about travelers who vanished in the dark, about voices on the wind, about lights that dance just out of reach. These tales swirl around the camp, growing bolder as the night deepens. Even the bravest among you glance over their shoulders, checking for shapes in the dark, for eyes glinting at the edge of firelight. You try to sleep, but the ground is hard, the sand gets everywhere, and every noise is magnified. The restless movement of camels, the distant call of something wild, the sudden gust that rattles a tent or sends grains of sand skittering across your face. Your dreams are strange, fragmented, a swirl of heat and dust, and the fear of waking up alone. The caravan vanished like a mirage. There is no comfort in numbers. Everyone feels exposed. The line between safety and danger is drawn so thin it might disappear with a single mistake. Fatigue settles in as an invisible companion. Days in the desert do not pass like days in the city. The sun is relentless, burning away every drop of sweat and hope, draining color from the world,
until only pale shadows and bleached bones remain. You ration water until your mouth aches with thirst. You guard your food with a new vigilance, watching others for any sign of desperation. The weak suffer most. Those who fall behind, who grow careless or hopeful, are the first to pay. Sometimes it is an animal, legs trembling, finally collapsing under the sun's weight. Sometimes it is a traveler, silent at morning's light, covered respectfully, but left behind out of necessity. The road is merciless, and the sand swallows all things quickly. There is an intimacy to suffering out here, a quiet camaraderie that binds you to those who endure alongside you. You share stories not of triumph, but of survival. How to shield your face from the wind, how to spot the subtle curve of a dune that means water may be buried below. You learn to treasure small kindnesses, a half cup of water shared, a hand steadying yours as you stumble. The smallest comforts, a dry corner in the shadow of a camel, the scent of a cooling breeze, are precious. Nights remain restless. Sometimes a strange light dances at the edge of vision, or a howl rises in the darkness, setting everyone on edge. You hear stories of entire caravans led astray by ghostly lanterns, of treasures lost to shifting dunes. Each morning you count the animals and your companions, scanning for what the night may have taken. Every loss is felt, silently, bitterly. A beast, a friend, a piece of yourself. You bury what you can and move on, knowing the desert does not wait for grief. But with every day and night beneath the open sky, you change. You become sharper, learning to read the language of wind and sand, to trust your instincts when reason is useless. The fear never leaves entirely, but it becomes familiar, another companion, another tool for survival. Sleep comes in fits, and dreams remain haunted, but when you wake, you are still here. The stars above bear silent witness, indifferent to suffering, offering only the promise that, by enduring, you have won another day in the world without walls.
The first true test comes when the caravan enters the great void of Taklamakan, a name spoken in every campfire story, a word that clings to the tongue with dread. The locals call it the desert you can enter but never leave. And no matter how much you try to laugh off the legend, there is a shift in the air as the first golden dunes rise before you, rolling to the horizon in restless, silent waves. Everything you have endured so far has been practice. Now you face the heart of emptiness, a land built to expose every weakness, a place where even hope can dry out and blow away before noon. You do not realize at first how fragile you are. The days begin to bleed together, each one hotter than the last, each sunrise less forgiving. Water becomes a calculation so cruel it borders on madness. Every drop is measured, every mouthful debated, every skin checked for leaks twice before you dare take a sip. Thirst creeps in quietly, a prickling at the back of the throat, a tightening in the chest. By midday, it is all you can think about, the sound of water, the imagined taste of it, the way your mind replays memories of rivers and wells until they are as sharp as the heat that presses against your face. Sand is everywhere. It gets into your ears, your eyes, your teeth, your food. It wears down every piece of clothing, rubs skin raw, and fills the air with a grinding music that drowns out thought. When the wind rises, it doesn't just sting, it blinds, buries, erases. A clear blue sky turns suddenly dark, the horizon vanishing behind a wall of swirling grit that hisses across the dunes. Camels bellow and stumble, their drivers wrapping scarves tightly around their faces, voices muffled and urgent. You press low to the ground, arms covering your head, the world shrinking to a suffocating swirl of yellow and red. There is nothing to do but endure, to trust the storm will pass before you are lost for good. After, the landscape looks changed. Familiar tracks vanished, supplies shifted, a new layer of unease added to every heart.
The Taklamakan is full of stories, and each one feels possible here. Some say the dunes themselves move at night, swallowing whole caravans in silence. Others swear that ghostly lights appear in the distance, leading the desperate off course. There are tales of spirits disguised as children, begging for water, and bringing only ruin to those who answer. You listen to these legends in the huddled dark, watching the shadows leap across the tent wall, feeling the old fear coil tight in your stomach. The desert makes believers of everyone. Every strange noise, every flicker on the horizon is a reminder that you are trespassing in a world older and more merciless than any city's walls. Days are endless trials. Nights, a mixture of fevered dreams and grinding exhaustion. Sometimes, someone simply cannot go on. The group stumbles to a halt as one of your number drops to their knees, eyes glazed and lips cracked. There are moments when you cannot remember when you last spoke, when conversation becomes a luxury, when all that matters is placing one foot in front of the other, hoping the next step brings you closer to the edge of this sand-blind maze. The animals suffer too. Camels, usually so stubborn and resilient, begin to falter. Their eyes lose focus, their pace slows, and it becomes clear that the desert is claiming its due from every living thing that dares cross it. Hunger gnaws, but it is thirst that rules. Each night, as the world cools and the sky unfurls with a cold glory of stars, you count your water, your remaining food, the faces around the fire. You hear the slow, deliberate breathing of those still awake, calculating the odds, weighing the risks. Some pray, some mutter curses, some lie silent and motionless, conserving energy for the coming day. There is no room for pretense here. Taklamakan strips you down to what you really are. You find yourself making strange bargains in your head. One more mile without complaint, one more sunrise, and perhaps you'll be granted a little rain, a patch of shade, a lucky break. At the edge of survival, psychology becomes your greatest battlefield. Thoughts circle endlessly. Will this ever end? Is there enough? Am I the only one afraid? You watch yourself become a different creature, one whose world has narrowed to thirst and caution, one who sees visions in the heat, who sometimes speaks to the wind just to hear another voice. You learn to live in the present, to abandon every plan except the next step, the next breath. In the Taklamakan, memory and imagination fade, leaving only raw endurance and the hope that the dunes will let you pass.
The morning you finally see green. Distant, wavering, more illusion than promise, something within you dares to believe you might survive. But even as the first hint of escape appears, you know that part of you will never leave this place behind. The desert is not just a passage, but a mirror, one that shows every fear, every weakness, every scrap of strength you have left. In the end, those who cross Taklamakan are marked by it, their dreams forever shaped by the memory of sand, thirst, and the knowledge that out here, a single mistake is never forgiven. There comes a point, after days of burning skies and air so dry it seems to swallow every word, when even hope becomes fragile. That's when the rumor of water spreads through the caravan like the scent of rain on hot stone. A guide points to a pale smudge on the horizon. A trader swears he smells damp reeds, and suddenly every eye is searching, every heart beats faster. The promise of an oasis is a lifeline thrown to the drowning. It becomes an obsession. Each weary step is measured not by the pain in your feet, but by the distance to the first glimpse of green.
The contrast is so sharp it feels unreal. One moment, the world is nothing but sand, glare, and the aching sameness of colorless days. Then, all at once, a patch of green wavers into view. Palms clustered around a gleam of water, low roofs rising from the dust, the promise of shelter and rest. For a while, you're not certain it's real. So many times, the heat has conjured up phantom lakes, made distant stones shimmer like cool pools. But this time, as the caravan draws closer, the shapes sharpen. The air grows heavy with the scent of earth and blooming things, the sound of bird calls and the distant laughter of children. The relief is almost overwhelming. Reaching an oasis is like stepping from nightmare into forgotten memory. The shade beneath the trees is thick and cool. The water, real water, drawn in cold, brimming buckets. You drink greedily, ignoring the pain in your cracked lips, letting the liquid revive parts of you that felt half gone. Dust-caked hands are plunged into the stream, faces washed clean, bandages soaked and rewound. Even the animals sense the change, moving with new energy, rolling in the soft mud and crowding the watering holes. The air is different here, softer, gentler, as if the world itself is breathing out after holding its breath for too long. For a while, the oasis is paradise. The market bustles with color and noise, every stall offering things you've almost forgotten: ripe fruit, cool cloth, sweet tea that tastes like a childhood dream. Strangers seem friendlier, their voices musical, their gestures warm. It is tempting to believe that all the dangers are behind you, that you have reached some secret end of suffering. There are nights filled with music and firelight, stories traded in a dozen languages, and the comfort of sleeping without fear that the darkness will swallow you whole.
But oases have their own price. The crowds are thick with those who arrived before you. Other caravans, some battered, some suspicious, some barely clinging to their sense of purpose. Supplies are precious, and the water, though sweet, is never endless. Competition flares between groups, and what began as laughter sometimes curdles into sharp glances and tight-lipped arguments. Old rivalries resurface, and trust, so hard to build on the road, proves even more fragile when there is something real at stake. The first disappointment comes quietly. The water runs slow or is tainted by careless hands. A promised shipment of grain is found to be moldy. Repairs take longer than expected. A broken sandal can't be replaced, or a camel falls ill from some strange local sickness. Rumors drift through the camp that the next oasis is farther than you've been told, or that the routes ahead are closed by bandits, or the whim of a distant governor. The green that seemed so magical at first reveals its limits. A ring of life surrounded by miles of waiting sand, a temporary reprieve, never a guarantee. You begin to understand that an oasis is not a destination, but a brief pause, a place to gather strength, to trade stories and supplies, to taste what it means to feel safe again. The road calls you onward, and soon the comfort of shade and sweet water turns bittersweet. With each visit, you learn not to expect miracles, not to believe that relief will last forever. Every rest is haunted by the knowledge that ahead lies another stretch of dust and thirst, another test of endurance and faith. When the time comes to leave, you do so reluctantly, lingering in the shade as long as you dare. You carry the memory of the oasis with you, the taste of water, the coolness on your skin, the fleeting sense of belonging. But as you step beyond the last palm, the green recedes, swallowed by the endless horizon. Hope is renewed, but so is caution. You know now that the journey is measured not by the comfort you find, but by how well you carry it with you into the wilderness once more. The world transforms again as you leave behind the familiar dust and heat of the lowlands and begin the long, slow climb into the mountains. The air thins with every step, turning each breath into an effort, a test. The Pamirs are nothing like the desert. Here, the land rises in impossible walls of stone and ice. Valleys twist into the clouds, and every path is both a promise and a threat. It is said that these are the roof of the world, a land where even the bravest travelers feel small, where the sky presses down and the earth seems to tilt beneath your feet. At first, the crisp wind feels like a blessing. The heat is gone, replaced by a sharp cold that wakes you up, makes your heart beat faster. The animals, too, seem livelier, striding into the green patches of mountain grass with relief after so many days of endless sand. The sky is bluer than you've ever seen, the sun so bright it hurts your eyes. For a moment, you think you found escape, a way out of the suffocating monotony of the desert, a path to somewhere truly new. But soon the climb takes its toll. The road grows steeper, and each turn reveals another ridge, another stretch of jagged rock. The air grows thinner, and you notice it first in the smallest ways. A lightness in your head, a trembling in your fingers, the way conversation trails off because it is easier to save your breath. You have to rest more often, your legs turning heavy and clumsy, your chest burning with each intake of air that never seems quite enough. At night, you lie awake listening to your own heartbeat, the pulse loud and uncertain in the silence. The altitude is a silent adversary. Some in your group begin to cough and shiver, their faces flushed or pale, eyes red-rimmed with fatigue. The old guides warn you about the mountain sickness, about how quickly it can strike, headaches, dizziness, nausea that makes even the simplest meal impossible. There is no cure except rest and time, but the road will not wait for the weak. Animals suffer too. Camels and horses alike move more slowly, their sides heaving, sometimes collapsing on narrow paths where there is no room for mistakes. Every stumble is dangerous. Every misstep could send a beast and its precious cargo tumbling into the abyss below. You become hyper-aware of the landscape. The mountains are both breathtaking and terrifying, sharp-edged, ever-changing, sometimes hidden behind a veil of fast-moving clouds. The weather shifts without warning. One hour the sun blazes, and the next you are blinded by snow or battered by icy rain that seeps into every seam and buckle. The path narrows to ledges barely wide enough for a person, let alone a loaded animal. You press yourself against the rock, whispering encouragement and silent prayers as the caravan inches forward, the drop yawning at your side.
Food spoils more quickly in the cold, and fires are harder to light. The wind steals your warmth and your courage, howling through the passes at night, shaking tents and nerves alike. There are days when the group moves in silence, each person wrapped in their own struggle. The guides warn you to listen to the mountains, to watch for avalanches and rockfalls, to never travel alone. Even so, accidents happen. A rock shifts, a foot slips, and suddenly you are all reminded of how fragile your grip on life is here. And yet, for all the fear, the mountains command a strange reverence. Standing at a high pass, looking down at clouds swirling far below, you understand why the old legends call these peaks sacred. You feel exposed, but also alive, a single figure dwarfed by the immensity of stone and sky. In those moments, the hardships seem almost worth it. The pain, the exhaustion, the constant threat of danger, because you have glimpsed a world larger and stranger than anything you imagined. By the time you begin the slow descent, you are changed. The air thickens, your lungs grow stronger, and you realize that what you survived has become a part of you,
as indelible as any scar. The Pamirs teach humility and patience, and the journey through them is a reminder that on the Silk Road, each new challenge is different, each test more subtle or more brutal than the last. You leave the mountains behind knowing they will haunt your dreams, their white-capped peaks a symbol of both fear and possibility, a place where you learned just how far you could go when the world itself seemed to be closing in. Winter comes without ceremony. One morning, you wake to a sky the color of dull steel, and by noon the first flakes are swirling, slow and harmless, more beautiful than threatening. But snow on the Silk Road is never just an inconvenience. It is a shifting mask, a sly danger that transforms the world you thought you knew into something alien. The roads, already uncertain, vanish beneath a blanket of white. Familiar landmarks fade into featureless drifts, and the comforting pattern of footprints and animal tracks is erased with every passing hour.
At first, you tell yourself it's nothing. You bundle up in every scrap of cloth and fur you own, watch your breath billow in the frozen air, stamp your feet to keep feeling in your toes. The cold bites, but there's a certain thrill to it, a reminder that you're alive and moving, that you can face whatever the world throws at you. But soon, the novelty vanishes. The cold presses in on every side, a relentless, hungry presence that seeps through wool and leather, gnaws at fingers and noses, makes every movement a negotiation between need and pain. The snow complicates everything. Progress slows as the animals labor through drifts, legs trembling, heads hung low. You stumble often, slipping on hidden ice, cursing as you pull yourself upright and brush the snow from your eyes. Sometimes the wind rises suddenly, carrying a blinding storm that cuts visibility to nothing. The group huddles together, calling out to one another, counting bodies, desperate to avoid being separated even for a moment. The landscape is transformed into a maze of whiteness where every direction looks the same. The fear of getting lost becomes a constant companion. Food grows scarcer. Fires, once a comfort, become a challenge to build and maintain. Wood is rare, and what little can be found is often damp or buried. Meals shrink to whatever can be chewed without freezing your jaw. Hard biscuits, bits of dried meat, the last handfuls of nuts and fruit saved for emergencies. Hunger takes on a new edge, sharpening tempers and clouding thoughts. Stories drift through the camp about groups who wandered in circles until their supplies ran out, about hidden crevasses that swallowed whole caravans, about lone figures seen from a distance trudging hopelessly toward nowhere. The days shrink, swallowed by long, restless nights. Darkness falls early and lingers late. In the tent, you listen to the wind clawing at the canvas, feel the chill working its way into your bones. Sleep comes only in fitful bursts, broken by the cold or the howls of animals anxious for warmth. Paranoia grows in these frozen hours. Every shadow seems to move, every unfamiliar sound hints at disaster. A pack torn open, an animal gone missing, a companion's coughing fit that will not stop. Suspicion, always present, deepens. You watch your neighbors with wary eyes, clutch your possessions closer, wonder if someone is hiding food or plotting to sneak away in the dark. Sometimes, despite all precautions, people are lost. A traveler leaves the path to relieve himself, loses his bearings, and is swallowed by the storm. A pair of drovers, convinced they know a shortcut, vanish into the white, never returning. A horse falls through thin ice and must be left behind, its cries echoing long after the caravan moves on. Each loss is felt keenly, a tightening in the chest, a sense that the group itself is shrinking, growing weaker, each member forced to carry a heavier share of grief and fear. The cold does not relent. You measure time not by days, but by survival. One more sunrise, one more handful of food, one more story shared in the dark. Hope flickers, but refuses to die, fed by memories of warmth and the stubborn refusal to yield. There is a kind of courage born from endurance, from the knowledge that even when the world conspires to bury you,
you can still put one foot in front of the other, still find a way forward. Every morning that you wake to a sky streaked with pale light, every night that ends with your group still together, feels like a quiet victory snatched from the jaws of winter. Yet, when spring finally comes and the snow begins to melt, it reveals more than the old path. It uncovers what the cold tried to hide, the marks of struggle, the scars left by loss, the simple, stubborn humanity that refuses to vanish, no matter how deep the drifts or how long the night. And you know, looking back, that the greatest danger was not the snow, or the hunger, or even the fear, but the silence that tried to settle over you all, the threat of surrender. Surviving winter on the Silk Road means never letting that silence win. There is a different kind of cold that settles on the caravan once you leave the safety of an oasis or mountain pass. A cold that has nothing to do with weather. It is the uneasy tension that comes from knowing, no matter how many miles you've traveled, how many hardships you've survived, there is always a new threat lurking just out of sight. On the Silk Road, every night spent beneath the stars feels like an invitation to danger. Sometimes it comes with the low, hungry howl of wolves echoing across the plains. Sometimes it takes the shape of men, with their faces wrapped and blades glinting in the moonlight. You become a watcher by necessity. Each night, sentries are posted and torches kept burning, not just to ward off wild animals, but to remind any would-be thieves that someone is always awake. The threat of wolves is a constant, packs that shadow the caravan for days, their eyes glowing at the edge of camp, their presence felt in every missing goat, every restless shift of the camels. You listen to their howls, and beneath the animal fear is the knowledge that the world is full of hungrier, more cunning predators.
Bandits move like shadows, never seen until it's too late, their numbers growing with every rumor of a rich caravan or a weakened group. The first sign is almost always the same, a flicker of movement on the ridge at dusk, a distant glint, a nervous hush that spreads through the camp. Stories run ahead of them, tales of sudden attacks, of camps set ablaze, of travelers stripped of everything but their lives, if they are fortunate. You sleep with one hand on your pouch, the other within reach of whatever weapon you possess. Trust grows thin, and every new face is a question. Are they a true companion or a spy for something darker, waiting beyond the firelight? The fear of betrayal works its way into every relationship. You see it in the way guards cluster together, sharing private jokes in low voices, casting suspicious glances at merchants who keep to themselves. Every partnership is scrutinized. Who paid the guards last, and are they loyal to gold or just waiting for the highest bidder? You hear whispers at night, accusations, bargains, shifting alliances. Sometimes the danger comes not from outside, but from within. The lure of profit, of survival, breeds a ruthless logic. If supplies run low, if a deal goes sour, even the most trustworthy companion can become a rival. There are nights when the air is thick with suspicion, when a guard's absence goes unexplained, when a trader's wares disappear and no one saw or heard a thing. Arguments flare, sharp and dangerous, tempers frayed by hunger and exhaustion. Factions form, small groups huddling around their own fires, each convinced the others are plotting against them. The threat of violence is never far. You learn to hide your fears behind a mask of indifference, to sleep lightly, to keep your belongings close. And then, sometimes, the threat materializes.
One night, you wake to shouts and the crash of metal. Bandits have struck, silent and efficient, so in chaos in the confusion. Or a sentry is found gone, his post abandoned, leaving a gap in the watch that is quickly exploited. The attack is swift, desperate, and merciless. In the aftermath, the losses are tallied. A wounded guard, a stolen animal, supplies vanished, and the sick realization that not everyone in the caravan can be accounted for. It is only then you understand how thin the line between order and chaos truly is, how quickly trust can shatter. But the most insidious danger is what lingers afterward. Fear becomes habit. Eyes dart to every movement, every shadow. Conversations are guarded, smiles brittle. Even after the immediate threat has passed, the wounds remain. Doubt, mistrust, the gnawing sense that safety is an illusion. You notice how easy it is for suspicion to take root, for accusations to fly. There are those who would rather risk a fight than admit weakness. Others slip away, unable to bear the burden of fear any longer.
Still, the road demands you move forward. You do so with a heightened caution, sharing fewer words, sleeping with your back to a wall when you can find one. In every caravan there are stories of traitors, of ambushes narrowly avoided, of friendships broken by greed or the simple will to live. You realize that in a world as dangerous as the Silk Road, the most dangerous enemy is sometimes the one who knows your name, who has walked beside you for weeks, who sits beside the same fire. And yet, despite everything, you keep going. Because to stop is to be left behind, to become just another story whispered at the next camp. The fear sharpens you, keeps you alert, but it also changes you. You become wary, resourceful, unwilling to trust too easily, but never entirely without hope. Even in the darkest moments, you cling to the possibility that not everyone is an enemy, that somewhere in the shifting shadows, there are still those who will stand by you when the wolves and bandits close in. This hope, however faint, is what keeps you moving, step by careful step, along a road where every companion is both a lifeline and a risk. There are moments when the endless road, with its dust and danger, suddenly gives way to the vibrant sprawl of a trading city, a mirage of prosperity that shimmers on the horizon long before you reach its gates. After weeks of monotony and fear, the sight is overwhelming. Stone towers rising from the flat land, colorful banners snapping in the wind, the dull hum of thousands of voices merging into a river of sound. The promise of safety, profit, and rest pulls you forward, quickening every step. Crossing the threshold into the city is like stepping into another world. The narrow streets are packed with people and animals, merchants from distant lands shouting in dozen languages, peddlers pushing carts piled high with spices and fabrics, children darting between legs with sticky fingers and wild laughter. The air is thick with the smells of roasting meat, crushed herbs, and the smoke of incense drifting from hidden shrines. For a moment, the fatigue of the journey falls away, replaced by wonder and the thrill of possibility. Here, for the first time in ages, you feel the energy of civilization, its promise of wealth, its sense of order, its dazzling unpredictability.
But beneath the noise and color is another current: suspicion, calculation, and the knowledge that for every fortune made, many are quietly lost. Entry is never free. At the city gates, guards demand your name, your business, and, more often than not, a payment, discreet or overt, to speed your passage. Papers are inspected, then inspected again. Goods are poked and prodded by bored officials, and the question of taxes hovers like a vulture over every transaction. Sometimes a few coins will smooth the way. Other times, nothing will. Your first lesson in city life is that bureaucracy here is a game, and every official has learned to play it to their own advantage. Inside the walls, you are swept along by the crowd, pushed and pulled by currents stronger than any desert wind. The markets are dazzling, overwhelming. Everywhere you turn, there are sellers hawking their wares with promises too good to be true, buyers squabbling over prices, thieves slipping through the throng with the subtlety of ghosts. It is easy to get lost among the colors, the sounds, the schemes. You learn to hold your pouch close, to watch every hand, to meet every gaze with caution. Nothing in the city is as it first appears. Finding a place to trade is another battle. The best spots are fiercely guarded, controlled by local guilds or wealthy families who see every newcomer as a threat or a mark. You haggle for a stall, only to discover the rent has doubled since yesterday, or that you must pay in favors as much as in coin. Old traders band together, forming alliances and quietly warning one another about which officials demand the highest bribes, which streets are safe after dark, which inns will steal your goods the moment you close your eyes. You move through this world with the constant awareness that here, too, you are an outsider, always being measured and tested. And yet, the city is full of opportunity. If you are lucky, if you play the game well, if fortune smiles on your wares and your wit, you might leave richer than you arrived. The markets are hungry for novelty, exotic silks, rare spices, strange animals, tales from distant lands. Sometimes a single deal, struck at the right moment with the right person, can change everything. You watch the veteran traders, noting how they laugh and flatter, how their words are as carefully chosen as their merchandise. Success here is measured not just in profit, but in survival, the ability to navigate the city's traps and temptations without being stripped of everything you carried so far. But disappointment is always waiting, just behind the next corner. Goods may be seized on a whim. A promised sale evaporates with a careless word, or a rival undermines your business with a whisper to the wrong official. More than once, you hear stories of fortunes lost overnight, a merchant ruined by false weights, a caravan impounded by a jealous tax collector, a trader beaten and left penniless for trusting the wrong partner. The city, for all its allure, is just another stretch of the Silk Road, no less dangerous, no less uncertain. At night, the city's lights seem to promise safety, but you sleep lightly, your dreams uneasy. Outside, the noise never quite fades. Even in your rented room, you feel the pulse of the market, the sense that everyone is watching, judging, waiting for the next misstep. You wake with the knowledge that in the morning you must decide again, to risk another day in the maze of deals and dangers, or to gather what you have left and slip back onto the road, chased by hope and the fear that what you seek is always just beyond the next gate. At first, the market feels like the very heart of civilization, a place where anything can be bought or sold, where fortunes shift hands in the blink of an eye, and every sense is assaulted by color, sound, and the dizzying scent of spices and sweet smoke. Under a canopy of bright banners, merchants lay out their goods in a patchwork of luxury and desperation. Bolts of silk stacked beside jars of rare honey, gleaming copper bowls traded for foreign coins, stacks of dried fruit and exotic roots piled high in hopes of catching a buyer's eye. Every stall is a performance, every pitch a carefully rehearsed act designed to turn curiosity into gold. But behind the cheerful chatter and theatrical displays, the market is a battlefield, and the stakes are survival itself. Every deal is a contest of wits, every handshake laced with caution. Traders circle each other warily, their smiles sharp, their eyes quick to catch hesitation. Bargaining is an art form. Stories are spun, origins exaggerated, flaws disguised, and virtues inflated.
You watch as a vendor passes off ordinary saffron as a miracle from a faraway land, or a crate of nearly rotten fruit is sold to an unwary traveler with promises of youth and strength. Everyone is angling for advantage, and even the smallest transaction is a chance for victory or disaster. You learn to read people quickly, the confident stride of a seasoned buyer, the nervous glances of a newcomer, the sly exchange of looks between partners plotting a price war. Some merchants are blunt, their voices booming across the stalls as they challenge each other, hurling boasts and insults in equal measure. Others are subtle, their negotiations a quiet dance of hints and implications, as much about saving face as saving coin. Even the buyers play their part, feigning indifference until the very last moment, driving bargains with feigned reluctance and sudden bursts of generosity.
But the market is more than trade. It is a place of testing and temptation, a gauntlet for the senses and the stomach alike. Every day brings new foods to taste, some strange and inviting, others alarming in their pungency or texture. Spicy broths ladled from steaming cauldrons, sticky pastries that leave your fingers glistening, slices of dried meat strung on twine, fruits that burst with sweetness or bite with sourness. You sample everything at first, your curiosity overriding caution, swept up in the promise of pleasure and adventure. Soon enough, the consequences arrive. The food, for all its allure, is as much a risk as a delight. Water drawn from unknown wells leaves a sour taste and an uneasy stomach. That sticky cake bought from a street vendor turns out to be more grease than grain, its aftertaste lingering far longer than its brief sweetness. The spices that so enchanted your tongue burn twice as fiercely in your belly. Illness, that shadow companion of every traveler, makes itself known in the sudden twist of cramps, the feverish chills, the frantic search for relief. The city's healers do brisk business, their remedies as varied as the wares in the bazaar. Bitter teas, pungent roots, whispered charms against market sickness. None of this stops the trading, of course. The urgency of profit is stronger than the discomfort of a sour stomach or the memory of a ruined night. Deals are struck between bouts of queasiness, bargains made even as sweat beads on your brow. Some merchants, wise to the ways of travelers, offer guaranteed pure food and drink for a price. Others simply shrug, blaming the water, the weather, the weakness of foreigners who cannot handle real Silk Road fare. The longer you remain, the clearer the illusions become. Every apparent success hides a dozen failures. Every fortune masks stories of betrayal or loss. Some travelers arrive flush with hope and leave in ruin, their pockets emptied by clever cons or the unrelenting expense of survival. Others, hardened by years of experience, know how to hedge their bets, splitting their cargo, forging quick partnerships, always prepared to cut their losses and move on. You see the hunger in their eyes, a hunger not just for food, but for advantage, for safety, for some kind of certainty in a world that refuses to offer any. Yet, for all its dangers, the market is also a place of wonder. The crowds are alive with energy and invention, the air bright with possibility. There are moments, brief and shining, when a fair deal is struck, when laughter rings out over a successful trade, when the taste of a new fruit or the promise of a good night's sleep almost makes you forget the risks. In those moments, you realize why people return to the Silk Road cities again and again, chasing fortune through the chaos, willing to risk it all on the next bargain, the next meal, the next illusion of safety and success. And when the market quiets, when dusk settles and the stalls begin to close, you find yourself both exhausted and changed. No richer perhaps, but more seasoned, more wary, and a little more prepared for whatever the road brings next.
Out here, food is not just sustenance, it is a gamble. Each meal along the Silk Road is a negotiation between hunger and caution, curiosity and dread. The promise of exotic flavors and new traditions is everywhere.
a glimmer of adventure in the heart of exhaustion. But beneath the aroma of sizzling meat and simmering stews, danger waits with patient certainty. What you eat might become the story you tell with pride, or the mistake you pay for in fever and pain. In every city and camp, the offerings are temptations impossible to ignore. Markets overflow with baskets of fresh apricots, melons glistening in the sun, bundles of pungent herbs, strings of salted fish, pastries dusted with ground rose petals. Roasting spits turn slowly over glowing embers, sending up clouds of fragrant smoke that promise comfort, even luxury. Local cooks beckon travelers with bowls of spicy noodles, bread still warm from clay ovens, and stews so thick with meat and root vegetables that they stick to your ribs and your memory. But taste is a matter of trust, and on the Silk Road, trust is always in short supply. The water itself is your first and most persistent adversary. Wells vary from town to town, and each bucket drawn up is a leap of faith. Sometimes the water tastes metallic or faintly bitter, a sign of unseen minerals or pollution upstream. More than once, someone drinks deeply, grateful to have quenched their thirst, only to fall sick before morning, cramped and weak, feverish and cold, caught in the grip of something no remedy in the healer's kit can quite cure. The dangers multiply with the food. Some traditions are unfamiliar, their meaning lost in translation or masked by custom. You are offered raw milk, sweet and cool, but full of unseen threats. A stew rich with wild mushrooms might be a delicacy or a death sentence. The cook insists on its safety, but you notice that locals take only the smallest spoonfuls, watching strangers with wary eyes. There are dumplings stuffed with mystery meats, sausages laced with rare spices, eggs buried for weeks in clay and ash until they emerge glossy and pungent, a taste that lingers long after the meal ends. Eating becomes a performance, a show of bravery or trust, or desperation. Refusing food is an insult, sometimes a dangerous one, but accepting it means accepting every risk that comes with it. You watch the faces of your hosts for any flicker of concern, measure each bite, hoping you haven't chosen wrong. Meals are shared communally, hands reaching into the same bowls, cups passed from mouth to mouth. In this world, hygiene is a luxury, and caution is a silent guest at every table. Sooner or later, the consequences arrive. Sickness sweeps through the caravan without warning, striking down the healthy and the strong as easily as the weary and the weak. Bellies cramp, skin grows clammy, and eyes lose their sparkle. Whole groups are laid low, some too ill to stand, others shivering through the night in fits of agony. The healers do what they can: charcoal powders, bitter teas, whispered prayers, but the road will not wait. You move on, weaker, hungrier, clinging to hope and each other, learning too late which foods are safe and which should have been left untouched. Not all dangers are invisible. Sometimes a meal is laced with spite, a rival trader slipping something into your drink, a dishonest innkeeper cutting corners with spoiled goods. Rumors run wild in the wake of each new sickness. Fingers point, voices rise, and trust, already fragile, crumbles. The most cautious learn to boil their water, to carry their own small stash of dried food, to refuse certain offers no matter the insult. For many, the memory of an illness lingers far longer than the taste of any exotic delicacy. Yet, for all the risks, the need for nourishment never disappears. Hunger dulls your suspicions, and even after you've suffered, you find yourself drawn again and again to the market smells and the communal warmth of shared food. You take smaller portions, test each new dish with careful curiosity, and rely more on advice whispered from those who've survived longer on the road. Eating here is a lesson in humility, a reminder that survival is not just about strength or speed, but about adaptation and learning what the world around you demands. In the end, you come to see every meal as both a gift and a gamble, a necessary act of faith in a place where certainty is as rare as a clear, cold stream. Each dish you taste, each sip you risk, becomes another small act of courage, a wager against the unknown, a testament to your will to endure and keep moving forward, no matter how many times you lose.
Faith is everywhere on the Silk Road, woven into every greeting, every gesture, every marketplace and shadowed alley. The road is more than a line of trade. It is a vast and restless river of belief, carrying the prayers and customs of 1,000 cultures across mountains and deserts. Each new settlement or city pulses with its own rituals, shrines, taboos, and unspoken laws. And every traveler learns, sooner or later, that faith is both a comfort and a trap. You notice it first in the greetings. Some offer a blessing with bowed head and opened hands. Others press their fingers to brow or breast, murmuring words you cannot quite translate. On certain days, the markets fall silent as shopkeepers disappear into prayer, stalls left in the care of watchful children or locked tight against temptation. Smoke drifts from temples and mosques, mingling with the scents of spice and sweat, while distant bells or the wail of a call to prayer cut through the clamor of trade. For an outsider, every step is a negotiation, a careful dance between showing respect and unwittingly crossing a line. A gesture that means friendship in one place is taken as mockery in another. The way you share a meal, the hand you use to pass a cup, even the color of your headscarf or the angle at which you stand in a doorway, all are subject to invisible rules, enforced with the absolute certainty of tradition. Sometimes you realize too late that you have made a mistake. An old woman glares as you reach for bread with the wrong hand. A merchant's smile vanishes when you step into his shop wearing shoes. A guide mutters a prayer when you cross in front of him at dusk. These are the minor offenses, the ones that earn a frown or a whispered warning, a lesson quietly delivered over tea or in the privacy of camp. But some missteps are far more serious, and you quickly come to fear the things you do not understand. Certain shrines are off limits to outsiders, their thresholds guarded by sharp-eyed children or stone-faced elders. Certain topics are forbidden, stories told only in the safety of a closed room or never spoken at all.
Traveling with the caravan, you meet pilgrims on their own journeys, some clad in rags, others riding in grand processions, all driven by faith to endure the same dangers as traders and guards. At night, around the fire, stories of miracles and visions mingle with debates about scripture and law. Arguments sometimes flare between travelers of different beliefs, old resentments surfacing over a shared meal or a passing remark. Yet, just as often, you see small acts of kindness, a prayer quietly offered for a stranger, bread broken in silence, an invitation to shelter beneath the same tent no matter the gods you worship. But even the best intentions can be twisted by suspicion and fear. The road is haunted by tales of travelers imprisoned for careless words, of cargo seized as heretical, of arguments that ended not in forgiveness but in violence. The pressure to blend in, to show respect, is immense. You move through each day with eyes open and mouth closed, trusting your guide to steer you clear of disaster. Sometimes this works. Other times, a single misstep brings sudden consequences: a lost sale, an angry crowd, the need to flee a town before nightfall.
Through it all, you discover that faith here is not a simple shield. It is a living thing, as beautiful as it is perilous. It offers comfort to those who belong, but to the outsider it is a thicket of rules and expectations, a landscape more treacherous than any desert or mountain pass. You learn humility, patience, and the wisdom of silence. Gradually, you collect a handful of words and gestures from each place, a patchwork of prayers and signs of respect to carry with you on the road. And if you are lucky, faith becomes not just a source of anxiety, but a bridge, a quiet understanding that, for all the differences that divide the Silk Road, the longing for meaning, for connection, and for hope is something every traveler shares. Cleanliness back home was a ritual, a morning wash, the sweep of fresh water over your hands, the scent of herbs, the comfort of clean linen against skin. On the Silk Road, that ritual becomes a distant memory, quickly replaced by the relentless presence of dirt, sweat, and the constant itching sense that the very world itself is working to undo you. The caravan becomes a traveling microcosm of human frailty, a place where illness travels faster than the fastest horse, and every effort to stay healthy feels both necessary and futile. It begins with small things. The first sign is a persistent itch, a crawling beneath your clothes that won't be ignored. Lice become unwelcome companions, no matter how carefully you comb your hair or shake out your bedding. Soon everyone is scratching, quietly at first, then openly, as embarrassment gives way to resignation. You try oil, vinegar, strange-smelling pastes sold by peddlers who swear by their effectiveness. Sometimes they help, more often they don't. You learn to sleep lightly, waking often to check your skin for new bites, always knowing you are never truly alone. Then come the sores and ulcers, angry red spots that refuse to heal, rubbed raw by days in the saddle or the relentless friction of dusty cloth. Bandages are a rare luxury, and every wound is a potential invitation for infection. The heat bakes sweat into every crease and fold of skin. The cold cracks your lips and fingertips until they bleed. The air thick with dust and the breath of too many people crowded close together carries more than just the sense of travel. It brings the promise of fevers and coughs, of sudden chills that sweep through the caravan with merciless speed. Epidemics are feared above all. The mere rumor of illness can turn a friendly camp hostile, a city gate shut, a caravan divided. A single cough in the wrong place draws anxious stares. A merchant with a fever finds himself isolated, left at the edge of the camp, or forced to move on alone. There are stories, whispered at night, of entire groups turned away at the walls of a city, left to wander until the illness has run its course, or the travelers have vanished altogether. The fear is as contagious as any sickness. In the face of constant threat, medicine becomes both a hope and an illusion. Healers travel with the caravan, pouches full of bitter powders, dried roots, and precious jars of ointment. Some have real knowledge, passed down through generations. Others are little more than hopeful guesswork, promising cures for every ailment, delivering relief only half the time. You drink infusions that taste of earth and bark, swallow pills that leave your mouth numb, smear foul-smelling salves on every wound. Sometimes you recover. Sometimes the illness lingers, stubborn and mocking, a reminder that survival is often just a matter of chance.
Clean water is always scarce. Bathing is rare, often impossible, and each attempt is an exercise in compromise. A few handfuls of cold water from a muddy stream, a rag soaked and wrung out, the careful scraping of grime from fingernails. Clothes are worn and reworn, never fully free of dust or the scent of animals. Personal space shrinks to nothing, and privacy is forgotten. You come to accept the new normal, the smells, the discomfort, the half-healed wounds, and the knowledge that everyone is enduring the same battle, some more visibly than others. And yet, even in the grip of constant illness, the caravan moves forward. People share advice, remedies, superstitions, some helpful, most harmless. A stolen hour of laughter or music does more to lift spirits than any tonic. The strong help the weak, and sometimes, unexpectedly, the weak recover and return the favor. You learn to judge risk, to spot the early signs of danger, to act quickly when you can and endure when you must. Over time, what once seemed unbearable becomes routine. The body toughens or gives in, but always the road calls you onward. Medicine, like hope, is rationed carefully, never quite enough, always in demand. And as you trudge onward, you realize that the struggle for health is not just about comfort or pain. It is about persistence, about holding on when everything conspires to break you down. Illness is a constant companion, but so too is the stubborn determination to keep moving, to refuse to let the dust, the cold, the fever, or the fear define the journey or its end. On the Silk Road, every survivor is a testament not to perfect hygiene, but to endurance, adaptation, and the fierce will to see the journey through. No one dreams of bureaucracy when they first imagine the Silk Road. The word conjures images of freedom, open spaces, the thrill of adventure, riches within reach. Yet again and again, you find yourself stopped not by mountains or desert, but by the invisible, ever-changing web of rules spun by officials and rulers, each one demanding their due. Every border is a gamble, every city gate a test of patience, cunning, and luck. As you approach a new territory, you feel the tension rise in the caravan. Stories travel faster than the wind. Of a governor replaced overnight, of fresh banners flying above the walls, of new laws and old debts suddenly called in. You cannot plan for these things. The routes marked on your maps may be closed without warning, or a favored guide suddenly declared an enemy because of some distant feud. Sometimes an official smile means trouble. Sometimes a sneer hides a grudging willingness to let you pass, for a price. As you approach a new territory, you feel the tension rise in the caravan. Stories travel faster than the wind. Of a governor replaced overnight, of fresh banners flying above the walls, of new laws and old debts suddenly called in. You cannot plan for these things. The routes marked on your maps may be closed without warning, or a favored guide suddenly declared an enemy because of some distant feud. Sometimes an official smile means trouble. Sometimes a sneer hides a grudging willingness to let you pass, for a price. As you approach a new territory, you feel the tension rise in the caravan. Stories travel faster than the wind. Of a governor replaced overnight, of fresh banners flying above the walls, of new laws and old debts suddenly called in. You cannot plan for these things. The routes marked on your maps may be closed without warning, or a favored guide suddenly declared an enemy because of some distant feud. Sometimes an official smile means trouble. Sometimes a sneer hides a grudging willingness to let you pass, for a price. Documents become lifelines. You clutch travel passes stamped with seals from cities behind you, hope that the signatures are still valid, and pray that the next official in line can be convinced by coin, flattery, or sheer exhaustion. Every checkpoint is a theater of negotiation. The guards look for reasons to delay you, a missing mark, an ambiguous word, a cargo they claim needs special inspection. The waiting grates on the nerves. Hours lost beneath a blazing sun, tempers flaring as animals grow restless and merchants count their losses. No two places are alike. One town demands a tax on every bundle of silk and sack of salt.
another on the shoes you wear or the color of your headscarf. Some demand gifts outright, fine cloth, spices, a share of your profits, while pretending it's all perfectly legal. At times, officials appear from nowhere, holding scrolls that no one can read, declaring new taxes by the will of the Khan or for the safety of all travelers. Resistance is pointless. To argue too long as to risk confiscation, imprisonment, or the caravan being turned away entirely. These games of power and tribute are endless. Even after you've paid and moved on, you might find yourself summoned back. A new clerk with new questions, a fresh demand for coin. Occasionally, you hear the laughter of those who have bribed their way with silver and silk, passing through in a day what takes you 3. Other times, a rumor spreads of a merchant imprisoned for failing to bow deeply enough, or a shipment seized because of a forgotten document or a word muttered in the wrong language. The faces of authority change as quickly as the weather. Today's friendly scribe is tomorrow's suspicious interrogator. A region that was safe last season may now be in the grip of war, rebellion, or plague. You scan the horizon for banners, memorize the titles and rituals demanded by each new ruler, and adapt your story as quickly as the rules shift beneath your feet. There are those who thrive in this chaos, trading favors and secrets instead of goods, their wealth measured not in coin, but in names and connections. All the while you pay, sometimes in gold, sometimes in goods, sometimes in pride. Each toll weakens your purse, slows your progress, sours the air within the group. But to refuse is unthinkable. The Silk Road is a patchwork of ambitions and alliances, a living testament to the power of paperwork and the danger of being an outsider. And even when you cross a border safely, the memory lingers, of raised voices and open hands, of uncertain rules, and the constant, nagging sense that at any moment fortune could reverse with a single stamped paper or the flick of a bureaucrat's wrist.
You learn to carry extra coins, to master a dozen phrases of apology and flattery, to keep your face calm no matter how unfair the demand. Patience is a form of currency, resilience your greatest asset. With every border crossed, you are reminded that on the Silk Road, politics and paperwork are as formidable as any desert or mountain, a shifting landscape where sometimes surviving the journey means surviving the endless game of rules. Paranoia becomes its own kind of wisdom on the Silk Road. Long before the first real betrayal, you learn to keep your secrets close, your gaze steady, and your back never fully turned. The journey shapes your thinking. Every story, every sideways glance, every unguarded word is a lesson. Trust, once given freely, is now rationed with greater care than your water or your dwindling stock of coin. You watch, you listen, you remember that survival belongs to those who expect the worst and are prepared for it. Suspicion is a constant companion. You sense it in the way the caravan forms each night, in the careful counting of goods, in the tight knots binding every pack and pouch. Guards patrol with hands never far from their blades. Merchants sleep in shifts, each one sure the others are plotting to take more than their share. Sometimes it is little things, a pack found untied, a coin pouch left a little lighter, food vanishing in the night. Other times it's a look, a question asked too casually, the way a rumor spreads just fast enough to be useful for someone. To protect yourself, you learn to lie, not just to others, but to yourself. You downplay the worth of your cargo, scatter your goods among several packs, hide the best of your stock at the very bottom, or even entrust it to another group traveling in parallel, hoping to recover it further along the route.
You swap identities, names, even stories, leaving behind one version of yourself and inventing another if you sense the winds turning. The most cautious travelers hire decoys or fake disputes to draw attention away from their true interests. At checkpoints, you feign confusion, pretend not to understand the language, or quietly slip a coin into a palm, hoping the extra cost buys you a measure of safety. There comes a moment on the Silk Road when the logic of movement itself begins to unravel, when the certainty of forward becomes a memory, and the path, once so clear and full of purpose, dissolves into confusion. What starts as a single wrong turn, a fork missed in a dust storm, a guide's confident direction suddenly leading nowhere, grows into days of circling under a sun that never seems to set. The world stretches and shrinks by turns, the familiar rhythm of the road broken by doubt, exhaustion, and the quiet terror that you might not be found, or remembered, or even missed. At first, you tell yourself it's only a setback. The land changes, after all. Rivers shift their courses. Old trails are buried by new storms. Markers are lost to the drifting sand, or swallowed by sudden growth. Even the guides, so certain, so proud, grow silent, scanning the horizon with narrowed eyes, muttering to themselves in words you do not understand. The maps, already little more than hopeful guesses, become useless, their careful lines mocked by the endless sameness of the landscape. You keep moving, stubbornly, desperately, convinced that the next hill, the next shadow on the horizon will bring the world back into focus. But each day that passes without direction eats away at the mind. The routine that once kept fear at bay, wake, march, rest, repeat, breaks down, replaced by arguments and haunted silences. Hunger grows sharper, water tastes thinner, and the animals, sensing the group's uncertainty, become restless. Even the smallest inconveniences, blisters, aches, bites, the ceaseless sting of dust, begin to loom larger, swollen by worry and frustration. The caravan's unity fractures, suspicions flare, and the stories around the fire grow darker, more desperate. You feel it first in your body, the way your feet drag, the way your shoulders hunch under a weight you can't name. Sleep becomes difficult, haunted by dreams of endless wandering or of being left behind. You startle awake at nothing, heart pounding, the darkness pressing in on every side. Simple decisions, when to move, which way to turn, become impossibly complex, each one a potential disaster. Someone begins to mumble to themselves, counting steps or reciting prayers in a tight, frantic whisper. Another lashes out at the group, blaming guides, blaming fate, blaming you.
It is the mind, though, that suffers most. Doubt multiplies. Every promise of direction is questioned, every suggestion met with suspicion. You begin to wonder if the road ever truly existed, if you haven't been circling the same patch of earth for weeks. Your sense of time warps. The sun seems to rise and fall too quickly. The stars blur together, offering no guidance. Even the most seasoned travelers are undone by the uncertainty, their confidence worn away by the gnawing fear that the journey has become a trap with no exit. Isolation deepens. Each traveler retreats into themselves, hoarding hope and memories, replaying decisions made and remade until the past becomes as foggy as the future. Laughter disappears, replaced by sullen silence or sudden bursts of argument. The strongest among you grow withdrawn. The weak sink into a daze, barely eating, barely moving, their eyes fixed on some point in the distance that no one else can see. The sense of purpose that once kept you upright has vanished.
leaving only inertia, the mechanical urge to keep placing one foot in front of the other. Somewhere in this haze, you realize the road is no longer a line from one place to another, but a circle, a trap, a test, a crucible. The journey becomes less about reaching the next city or surviving the next challenge, and more about surviving yourself, your doubts, your regrets, your capacity for endurance when every comfort, every certainty, every story you once believed has faded into the dust. The line between reality and imagination blurs. The only thing that matters is to keep moving, to hope that eventually the world will change again, that the horizon will mean something more than another reminder of how far you have drifted from everything you once understood. And yet, beneath the confusion and exhaustion, something stubborn remains. You cling to small signs, a new plant, a change in the wind, the distant sound of running water, anything that might mean the world is not entirely indifferent. You remind yourself that the Silk Road, like all journeys, is built on persistence as much as on direction. Even when the route vanishes, even when the way forward becomes nothing but a question, you endure. You keep walking, battered and changed, searching not just for a city or a market or a safe place to sleep, but for meaning itself, hoping the road will one day return and carry you onward once more. Trade on the Silk Road is never as simple as bartering goods for gold. It is a shifting negotiation between necessity and risk, between the rules written in law and those whispered behind cupped hands. Sooner or later, every traveler learns that survival often means stepping beyond the boundaries of honesty, sometimes by a single silent gesture, sometimes by a leap that changes the course of a life. The farther you travel, the more you see that the line between merchant and outlaw is not a line at all, but a shadow moving with the sun.
The rules of each land are as tangled as the routes themselves. What is precious in one city may be contraband in another. What earns praise at one border earns suspicion, fines, or confiscation at the next. Spices, silk, precious stones, these things are worth fortunes, but also attract attention. Hidden within every pack and pouch are secrets. Extra bolts of cloth tucked beneath rougher goods. Vials of rare medicine labeled as perfume. Small caches of coins wrapped in dirty linen and disguised as nothing special. Even the most upright merchant learns to lie a little, to officials, to rivals, sometimes to their own companions. You become fluent in the subtle language of risk. The bribe slipped quietly to a border guard. The coded phrase exchanged with a market inspector, letting him know which packs not to bother searching. The winks and nods among veteran traders, signaling who can be trusted to look the other way, who can be counted on to keep a secret. Sometimes you smuggle a forbidden item for profit, sometimes simply to help a friend, or because a refusal would draw too much attention. Each compromise is small at first, a tax evaded here, a toll dodged there, but they accumulate, leaving you wondering, as you drift off to sleep, if you are still the person you believed yourself to be. Trust is always provisional, never absolute. The authorities themselves play double games. One official punishes what the next ignores, and all are eager for a share of your profit if the price is right. There are nights when a city gate closes early, and you slip out with the help of a guard, who will later ask for his favor to be repaid. There are deals made in the shadow of a tea house or behind the shelter of a market tent, each one sealed not with a signature, but with a look that promises silence. You see the same games played within the caravan. Sometimes what starts as mutual aid, watching over one another's packs, sharing information about prices and patrols, shifts, turning allies into competitors, or worse, informants. A rumor about contraband can be a weapon as dangerous as any knife, and more than once you see a rival's goods seized while yours go untouched, protected by nothing but timing and luck. Morality grows slippery in this world. You rationalize each choice. I must feed my family. I must pay my debts. Everyone else is doing it. By the time you realize how far you've drifted, it's too late to go back.
Not all risks are calculated, and not all consequences are fair. You hear stories of caravans ruined by a single careless word, of travelers imprisoned or worse for carrying goods that yesterday were harmless, today forbidden. There are those who vanish quietly, their names remembered only in whispers, cautionary tales passed around fires at night. Sometimes it is the law itself that turns criminal, punishing the innocent, protecting the cunning. You watch and learn when to keep quiet, when to protest, when to pretend ignorance. Yet, beneath the cloak of compromise and secrecy, the market still pulses with life. There are moments when a secret deal saves not just your own journey, but the lives of those who depend on you. There is a kind of brotherhood in shared risk, a grim camaraderie among those who understand what the world demands. You tell yourself it is only temporary, that you will return to honesty when the road is safer, the future clearer. But you know, deep down, that the road itself thrives on these shifting morals, that everyone who walks it is changed by the bargains made in its shadows. Every border crossed, every law bent or broken, is a step further from the world you once knew. But on the Silk Road, survival is never clean or simple. Each traveler decides for themselves how far they are willing to go, what they are willing to trade, not just in goods, but in truth, loyalty, and the person they hoped to remain. Here, at the edge of honesty and crime, you become both buyer and seller of your own soul, bargaining with fate as much as with any merchant or official you meet along the way. By the time the journey ends, you are no longer the person who first set foot on the Silk Road. Survival has become a part of you, a habit, a shield, a quiet voice in your head reminding you every morning that you are still here. But as you finally pass through the gates of a distant city, or feel the ache in your feet slow to a dull memory, you begin to realize that what you have gained is measured not in coin or cargo, but in the ways you have changed. The Silk Road strips you down to your essentials. You left home believing you would shape your own fate, but somewhere between the first border and the last market, the road shaped you instead. The world you once thought was vast and full of promise has narrowed to the basics of movement and need: food, water, shelter, the steady companionship of your own thoughts. Every day was a negotiation of trust, of morals, of how much you could bear to lose. And every compromise, every hard-won victory left a mark you cannot erase. The losses weigh as heavily as the gains. You remember faces that disappeared along the way, companions who fell behind, friends who vanished into the dust, names you no longer dare to speak aloud. Each one reminds you of the thin line between luck and loss, and the truth that survival was never guaranteed, never owed, never entirely in your hands. You tell yourself you did what you had to do, that every bargain and betrayal was a necessary answer to an impossible question. Yet, in quiet moments, you wonder who you might have been if the road had been kinder. There is a cost to every lesson learned. Suspicion, once a tool, now lingers even among friends. You move more quietly, trust less easily, watch the world with eyes that see danger in every kindness. The quick calculations and hard choices that kept you alive do not fade when the journey ends. They remain, habits etched into your days, shaping how you greet strangers and guard your words. Even joy is tempered, shadowed by the memory of risk.
The riches you carry home are real enough. Bundles of silk, rare spices, coins heavy in your pouch. But they feel insubstantial compared to what you left behind. There are moments of pride, of course. A deal struck at just the right moment. A night survived against all odds. The memory of laughter shared with fellow travelers. But the road's true inheritance is quieter. Resilience, adaptability, a kind of wary wisdom that does not celebrate victory, but quietly endures. Sometimes you catch yourself longing for what you had before, a sense of certainty, a trust in the future, the comfort of believing the world is simple. But the Silk Road does not allow you to return unchanged. You have seen too much, lost too much, endured too much to pretend you are the same. In place of certainty, you carry stories of suffering and survival, of kindness in unexpected places, of the hard, honest work of moving forward even when the path disappears. And so, when people ask what you found at the end of the Silk Road, you hesitate. They want to hear of treasures and adventure, of triumph and fortune. But you know the truth is stranger, quieter, harder to name. Survival, you realize, is not a victory to be celebrated, but a fact to be accepted. It is the sum of compromises, the echoes of decisions made in the dark, the scars you bear without complaint. The greatest change is inside you, a subtle, unspoken understanding that to survive is to be remade, to become someone who can walk through uncertainty and endure. The Silk Road takes as much as it gives, and for those who make it to the end, there is no simple triumph, only the quiet knowledge that you have endured, and in doing so, become someone else entirely. What you carry home is not just cargo, but the cost of endurance itself, written in every step, every silence, every memory that will follow you long after the last grains of dust have fallen from your boots.